Today on Chat Off the Mat, I'd like to introduce Alex Scot, a certified trauma-informed coach who helps her clients heal from narcissistic trauma so that they can reclaim their life and create healthy relationships. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm really excited to dive into the topic of narcissism,
Mhm.
narcissistic behavior, and healthy relationships. So I'm basically going to dive right into the topic. Um, So this morning I Googled narcissism and it came back with 408 million hits. So, so needless to say, it's a topic of discussion, and you hear more and more about
Mhm.
narcissism and narcissistic behavior. It's quite overwhelming, actually, the amount of information. Um, so, what I would like to hear from you is how would you describe what narcissistic behavior looks like, or narcissistic or narcissism?
Yeah, so there's different types of narcissism. So we can come up with I like to call them different flavors, different flavors of
Yeah.
narcissists. There's the vulnerable narcissist, which is very like the victimhood one. Woe was me, everything happens to me. Why can't anything ever work out for me? And then we have more of the kind of narcissism that we hear about more frequently, which is like this very egotistical, grandiose sense of self. And then there's even something called communal narcissism, which are people who, I'm a good person. I donate all this money every year and I serve at this soup kitchen. And how can you tell me I'm doing something bad? Like, I'm a good person. Those are the communal narcissists. So there's like different flavors of narcissistic behaviors out there. But when we look at like a very dwindled down, the one thing that all narcissistic people have in common is a refusal to feel shame at any and all costs. And this is why they blame others. They get hyper defensive. They're not self reflective. And so when I have someone who's wanting me to kind of define, like, how can we tell if someone's really narcissistic? There's all these different surface level behaviors you can look at, which some I just named. But really look for the cycle of abuse that narcissists lean into, which is love bomb or idolize, devalue, discard, hoover. And it becomes such a pattern that for the survivor of that environment, you can start to predict it. So if you know exactly like I'm going to say this and they're going to get upset and we're going to get in a fight and then it's going to be like 4 days of the silent treatment and then they're going to come back and they're going to tell me I'm so sorry, I'll do better next time. Like if you can literally like predict exactly what's going to happen, that's kind of a sign you're dealing with someone who has some sort of abuse cycle.
Wow. It's interesting. And I read that it's also a spectrum. So there
Yep.
are people that have, some forms of that
Mhm.
behavior, and then there's also those that have been diagnosed as
Yep.
narcissism. It's
Yep.
NPD,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
narcissistic personality
Personality
disorder. Yeah.
disorder, right? Um, so what classifies a person
Yeah.
as having NPD?
So, if we're looking at this from like a psychiatrist sitting down and is diagnosing, they're going to look for 9 different behaviors. And those are like lack of empathy, grandiose sense of self, and all those, like we hear about them all the time. But when we look at someone like what's the difference between someone who's just narcissistic and has narcissistic tendencies versus someone who's diagnosable, right? Because that's
Mhm.
really what I think we're trying to figure out here. And that's like narcissistic tendencies is they tap into those behaviors when they really need to, when it serves them, but it's not who they are at their core. Meaning it's not such a predictable abuse cycle that you can literally guarantee what their next move is going to be. When we look at someone who has a personality disorder, it truly is a disordered way of being. It's compulsive. They can't not be that. And so that's really the severity when someone is diagnosed with NPD, the person who's doing the diagnosing, they're really looking for that. Like it gets in their way of existence. Like they don't have friends because they can't be empathetic towards anyone ever. They can't take responsibility for their part in things that go awry, and that stems not only just from personal relationships, but at work too. And that's the other thing that I would say is, like, again, going back to narcissistic tendencies, they tap into it when it serves them. So this person might be a little narcissistic at work, but that doesn't mean that they're that way at home with their family, right? But when we look at someone who is truly diagnosable, every single facet of their life is the same. They have the same cycle show up. They're very self-destructive. So, I hear very commonly within my client stories and even in my own experiences where, like, these people job hop a lot. They
Mhm.
move a lot because they don't ever really have roots tied down somewhere, because by the time they've been in a place long enough for people to figure out their way of being, or for them to be isolated because they've mistreated people, they kind of need new supply. And so sometimes they move to, like, increase their social circle and all of that. So, I hope that kind of helps. But I think that when people are using the term narcissist so casually,
Yeah.
and so it's really, and I'm not a fan of that, because for the people who truly are survivors of narcissistic abuse, now they're being gaslit that you can't call people that. And it's like, but no, there's people who truly have experienced that. They have a right to name it for what it is.
Mhm.
So that's why I want to make the distinction between the two so much.
No, this is great. I love being able to educate the listeners, because like I said, there's so much information, and in just clarifying it is really helpful. So do people who have these behaviors, do they know they're doing this? Are they recognizing this, or is it so a part of them that they just don't know that this is how they are, or could it be either or
Yes and
both?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes and yes. So, from what I've heard of people who have been diagnosed with NPD because they've gone to court-ordered therapy, or and they're still in therapy, or they have at least been diagnosed but maybe they're not continuing therapy, is that they can tell what they're doing is wrong, but they don't know why they compulsively doing it. It's kind of like a drug addict, where it's
Mm,
like, like the drug is bad and you're like, I really got to stop. I really got to put this down. But you just are chasing this high of, like, but I have to do it. Where's the next hit going to come from? Like, I need it. I need it. I need it. It's a very similar desire and compulsive type tendency to have, where it's less about, and I hate to say it this way, but it's so true. Narcissistic abuse isn't personal, but for the survivor, it feels so personal. But really, the narcissist is just like, you're a means to an end. You are a vessel they can use to gain whatever they want from you. And then they kind of cast you and go on to the next one. And if you let them come back, they will come back to take whatever is left. And then they will just continue doing that. And that's why I always tell people, like, it's the survivor of the narcissistic abuse is so strong, because not only have they endured the abuse, but then they find the strength to actually cut the person out, like be the gatekeeper of their own life. Because it's like,
yeah.
once you start recognizing they're always going to come back as much as you let them, then you put that gate up and you're like, no more. And then you literally just what's the word, chess match, like,
Yeah.
checkmate.
Checkmate. Yeah.
Yeah, you've done that with the narc. The second you've cut them off like that, it's like, boom, no more
Hmm.
messing around with me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what the term is, when we recognize that there's something wrong, but we still have a hard time justifying not doing it, is
Yep.
that cognitive dissonance. I believe
Yeah.
that's the term used. Um, so you've experienced this behavior. We're going to circle back about more about a person leaving a relationship and all that, but you experienced this behavior from a parent early on.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you can describe this experience and how you were able to, you know, handle it or deal with it,
Yeah.
and not make it a part of your life anymore.
So I didn't know about the narcissistic parent until I had the narcissistic ex. And he had confided in me that he was diagnosed. And so I was like wanting to learn more about it. And I was like, wait a second, this sounds oddly familiar. And that's where kind of all the dots connected. And so, dealing with it growing up, I didn't I didn't know what I didn't know. In my mind, every parent treated their child that way. That was normal. And this is what abuse survivors do no matter what age they're exposed to the abuse. They normalize it in order to survive it. And so, that's why people who do experience any kind of abuse, no matter, we hear that word and think physical, but like verbal, emotional, like all those little T traumas that are left over from childhood, you again, no matter the severity of it, you normalize it in your brain. It becomes an very normal way of being and treated. And that means in adulthood, you fall prey to those same cycles. And this is why healing is so important, because until you change what is normal for you to receive, you'll keep finding the same cycles. And so, for a lot of abuse
Mm.
survivors, having someone give you something with no strings attached feels really weird. Having someone take care of you when you're sick, no strings attached, terrifying, because you're not used to receiving without any kind of something being held over your head or as a bargaining chip.
Yeah.
So anyway, in this moment when I started to realize that my parent was, and I actually ended up finding out from my older sister, she was diagnosed when I was in high school. But when I realized all of this, I was already in my mid to late 20s.
Wow.
And so at that point, and I think any survivor, you kind of reach this fork in the road moment where you're like, well, what do I do now? Do I try and like just suck it up and continue to deal with it? Or do I like try and stand up for myself? Because again, abuse survivor, standing up for yourself, you know what that means. You're going to get screamed at, cussed at, maybe physically assaulted. Like there's a lot. Like the narcissistic rage is what it's called when you start to stand up for yourself or not fall for their games anymore. So my first course of correction was to just without, because like I think a lot of people are like, justice, I need to tell you that you're a narcissist. And like, please, if you're listening to this, don't do that. It will backfire so bad. So I knew I was smart, like I was smart enough to know that. And then what ended up happening was I became a calculated person. Like I hate to say it, but it's one of those things where people pleasing unconsciously is very differently than people pleasing consciously. And for someone dealing with an abuser, sometimes it's necessary. I have to let you get your way here because otherwise I'm choosing to subject myself to more abuse. So that's one part of it. The other thing is I became extremely calculated about what I shared and didn't share with them, especially around holidays and birthdays, because I was already at a point because my parents divorced. I was already kind of like going back and forth between homes in adulthood, like through college and stuff. And so there were times where I was like, I'm working, I can't come to Christmas. And I would make that decision knowing that I'd rather work an extra shift and pick it up for
Mhm.
someone because that's going to be more joyful and peace filled than putting myself in this household. So there were a lot of like decisions I made without letting this person know, but like I was making on my behalf and very much be controlling my own life based off of, do I want to put up with this today or not? On this day, on my birthday, do I want to spend my birthday with them? Because I don't have to if I don't want to. And so, it was hard. Eventually, because the thing that was very specific for my story, but I know I'm not the only one, there's other people out here, their narcissistic parent leans into religious abuse on top of it. And so it got to a point over COVID where the uh verbal, emotional abuse, mental abuse, and also demand to conform of their way of being in their ideology was so intense, I finally cut them out. So
Mm.
I haven't had contact with this person for almost 4 years now.
Wow.
So that's how I dealt with it. And I think that when I have when I have people who work with me who had narcissistic parents, they ask me all the time, like, can I manage it or do I have to cut them out? And I'm like, I always am the team of like, let's see if we can manage it at first.
Yeah.
And guess what? If it becomes too not manageable, you can cut them out at that point. But I don't think there's a reason to like jump to cutting them out until you've kind of vetted all your options.
Yeah. I think what you were saying too with the people pleasing and the decisions that you were making were almost maybe I'm wrong, but fear based.
Oh my gosh,
Like,
100%.
yeah, yeah, I can relate.
Yeah.
So let's circle back to a person who's in a relationship with a narcissistic partner
Okay.
or friend or
Mhm.
whatever. Um, what what stops them? Well, first of all, there needs to be an awareness that something's happening, right?
Yeah.
And some people don't become aware, and
No.
then they're in this forever, and
Yeah.
they become like a, a shallow person,
Yeah.
or shallow, or a shell of their selves, I should
Right.
say. That's what I was trying to say. But what about the person who's aware that something's happening? What are the steps that they can take to
Mm,
crack open that door, to
yeah.
shimmy out
So
or make changes?
So the one thing I want to say before I jump into these additional steps is like I feel the need to be responsible as a practitioner and say if there has been physical violence, if there's been a threat of physical violence, if you've seen this person potentially have those tendencies, please get a safe exit strategy called the domestic hotline and use your local resources because the most dangerous times in these relationships are when someone gets pregnant or someone leaves. So I feel that I need to do my due diligence in saying that. Um, but it's very much a truth that anyone who's left one of these relationships knows you have to plot your escape. It's not a normal breakup where it was like, thanks for our time together, wish you all the best. Like, that's never going to happen. And a lot of abuse survivors want that to happen. They hold on to hope and almost project their way of being on the narcissist, right? Because it's like, well, I would give this person grace. Maybe they'll give me grace, right? And it's just like,
Mm.
anyone listening to this, like, their behaviors are fact. Like, trust your gut. It's not going to work like that. So, the first step is to like build up your support system. These people love to isolate you. So, one, if you're in the middle of it right now, don't let
Mm.
them. But two, reestablish those connections. Reach out to friends, reach out to family members, even if you haven't talked to them in a long time. If you're vulnerable with them and share with them, like, look, I'm plotting my escape to leave this. I know like things might have gotten sour between us because of this relationship, but like I need support right now. Can you help me? Can you be a resource for me? Or even can I come stay at your place? Like whatever, you know what I mean? But have that conversation. I think that is the very first step. The other thing is to gather your belongings without this person knowing. Ideally, in a perfect world, we're not living with them yet, right? Because living, like, once you are living with them, it becomes that much harder to leave. But
Yeah.
regardless, you want to definitely gather the belongings that you don't want to part ways with. Because any belonging you do leave with them, they are going to try and use that as a bargaining chip for you to come over and see them again. They're not going to let you just drive by and pick your stuff up if you leave it on a crate, if they leave it on a crate on the, patio. Like it's not going to work like that. So, get ahead of that problem by packing your most precious belongings and whatever you don't have with you when this conversation does eventually go down, be prepared to part ways with that. And that includes pets. Like,
Mhm.
literally, I have had people ask me about pets in this situation, which is just like a minefield to navigate. Nonetheless, obviously, children is a whole nother ball of wax. If you do have children, if you do own a house with them, please get a lawyer. I know it doesn't sound fun and it's not gonna be, but be protected. I'd rather anyone be overly safe and prepared than sorry. Um, yeah, and then from there, the other thing that I would start doing right off the bat is moving all communication to text and email. No more phone calls because you need a paper trail in case you have to get a no contact order or restraining order. So those are my first big steps, but it really is a process and it's a process that like I said before you need to be calculated. You need to look at what are their potential responses and behaviors when I write them this email or text saying, "Hey, thanks but no thanks. I'm going to move on. I've got my stuff, like wish you all the best." Like whatever text you send with them to officially say, "I'm leaving you." What are the potential reactions to that? Be
Yeah.
prepared for all of them. When they realize that I've taken my belongings, how are they going to react? Be prepared for all of them. If you have to get divorced, what are the potential reactions to them when you serve paperwork? Like, there's so much to think about. And that's what I encourage anyone to do before they even start taking action is like think before you do anything, get ahead of any response because then you're prepared and
Yeah.
you're, well equipped to handle the chaos that will ensue, but I promise it gets better. I can say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I'm listening to you and I keep saying or hearing survivor mode or warrior mode.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy thing when you're so conditioned to be with someone who verbally abuses you, or maybe even physically abuses you and you try to leave, you're already in a weakened state. So almost take that time to plan and try to stick to that plan. And I think having resources, like you said, is really important.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
necessary.
Yeah, I was in a very similar situation and yeah, I basically kind of got a bag and left when I was living with someone who, when I look back now, realize it was he was narcissistic and a narcissist, and it was, but luckily I got out and
Yeah,
so first step, and it
same.
wasn't easy, but I did it. Yeah, yeah. I escaped, you know. Um, I was listening to your most recent podcast, where you describe the effects that this behavior, this constant behavior, has on our nervous system,
Mm,
and that the victims of this behavior are in a constant stage of fight or flight, which
yeah.
affects the nervous system. How does this cycle of abuse negatively impact our nervous system and the effect it has on our health?
Well, it if so your nervous system when it's in a survival state, and that's fight flight, which is hyper aroused, but also fawn is a survival state, and that's people pleasing, and then freeze and dissociate, and then you can even have blended states. So like a blended state that all of us have been in is like you're exhausted, you're on the couch, physically stuck in a freeze mode, but your brain is in fight flight because it's like get off your ass, get to work, you know. Those moments, that's literally a blended state. And so the way it impacts you is a lot of people describe themselves as like, I feel like I'm always walking on eggshells. I'm always anticipating their mood swings. I'm always maybe the thinking ahead of what I just expressed, where like if you are trying to leave a situation and you need to think ahead, that in and of itself is a survival state because it's a form of anxiety. You're anticipating the future, and then it's a little mix of people pleasing, and so that you can adjust your behavior to make sure you master that environment, right? So there's like that's a hyper aroused people pleasing, which is fawning state. And so if you notice that about yourself, also another common one is wired tired but wired. So it's like you want to go to bed but your brain is like it doesn't feel safe going to sleep. You know, those are that means you're chronically conditioned in that environment. So that's how it impacts the nervous system is if you're in this environment regularly, like throughout childhood or an extended relationship, and you're around this person a lot, you are training your nervous system to always be in that survival mode, right? It's like
Right.
it's hyper aroused because it's waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's people pleasing, so it can like shrink and like find safety and like, oh, don't yell at me, please. Oh my gosh, you didn't see me, just do that, right? Um, and so when we are exposed to this, it's like going to the gym, right? Someone who trains for a marathon, they're in the gym every day so that their body develops resiliency to the endurance. You know, those muscles can last that long, be firing that long. It's literally the same thing in an abusive household. You're conditioning your nervous system to always be going, 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 like ready and waiting for the next attack, right? So this is why a lot of people exit these relationships and they're like, you know, I struggled with insomnia for so long, and they might still struggle with insomnia even when they leave. Because
Mm.
even though logically they're like, I'm not in that relationship. So why am I struggling with ruminating thoughts and anxiety and depression and insomnia still? Because your nervous system needs to be taught it's safe through nervous system work. Our nervous systems don't just automatically shift. So that's how it impacts our nervous system. It impacts our overall health. You know, there's a lot of people, sometimes I get hate, not often anymore, but when I first started, I used to get so much hate around using the term toxic, like toxic people, toxic partner, toxic relationship, toxic behavior. And they'd be like, you know, people aren't toxic, they're broken. And I'm like, I understand that
Mm.
I do, I really do. Cause like, you know, like narcissistic personality disordered behaviors come from a deep place of brokenness, of trauma. Still doesn't justify the abuse. And for the person who is receiving the abuse, it is toxic for them
Mm.
because your body gets put into a state of adrenal fatigue because your adrenals are pumping out stress hormones all the time. You have digestive issues because of it, because again, your
Mm.
body is constantly in a state of fight, flight, freeze. So people with IBS, whether that's the constipation kind or the runs kind,
Yeah.
staple fibromyalgia. Like there's so many different autoimmune disorders, the nervous system attacking itself. Like it all stems I don't want to
All
say all.
those mystery illnesses that come up.
Exactly, exactly. If you're like, "Where did I get this from all of a sudden?" Most likely it's trauma. And
Mm.
so, yeah, it really is toxic for the person surviving the environment because your body is doing its best. It's like on a hamster wheel, just trying to keep you alive.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it starts to shut down from the inside out.
Yeah, I could see, I was just thinking too, I do victims often, and I don't know the numbers, and I don't even know if they have numbers, but I'm always thinking it can lead to some substance abuse,
Oh
to an
my God, yeah,
addiction, right? Because they're numbing themselves. So they're sitting in their
totally.
house with the abusive person,
Yeah,
and they're drinking and they're doing whatever
yeah.
just to escape.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And it
Mm.
can and any kind of addiction, not just drinking, smoking
S-
weed, retail
yeah.
therapy,
Sex.
porn,
Yeah.
like
Porn.
yeah, all of it. And so it's like like workaholics
Oh yeah.
even.
Right.
Something or gym, I hate to use this term, but gym rats, like people who spend a lot of the time at the gym because guess what? They'd rather be at the gym than in the house.
Right.
So it's like, there's so many ways of coping that and I think people have like there's unhealthy coping and there's healthy coping, but really like all coping is avoiding healing and
Yeah.
finding true stability. And I don't want anyone to feel shame about it. Like it's a natural and understandable response to again find some kind of relief and respite from what you're experiencing. So we've all coped in our own ways. And so if you're developing a habit that you're like, I'm not really stoked about this, but like this is what I see, let's get curious about it. What feelings are we avoiding when we're reaching for that substance
Right.
or doing
It's
that
not,
thing?
and it's not
Mhm.
easy to
No.
try to change that behavior that you're
Mhm.
it's this behavior that you've been uh that is triggered by these things, by this emotion, or the situation that you're in. No, I get it, it's not easy. So let's talk about the narcissist for a moment, the person who has these behaviors, and I'm listening, and I'm almost feeling bad, for a moment, for this person who is the way they are. How did they become this way? I was doing some research, and some says, well, it's genetic or it's conditioned. It's from
Mm.
growing up. Like, where does it come from? Do we even know where it comes from?
I don't think anyone can without a doubt say 100% it comes from this or that. I think it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. Like,
Mm.
I think that what we know for sure to be true is that all narcissistic people, no matter the spectrum, like those behaviors are tapped into from trauma, from unresolved trauma. We can say
Right.
that for sure. But it's not necessarily genetic with a guarantee because then I would be a narcissist if my mom is one,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think really when we look at a lot of genetic diseases, I think we're very much monkey see, monkey do. And so if we're going to look at like NPD being potentially genetic, it's more like my parent treated me this way, so I'm going to treat other people this way because I turned out okay. Right? It's more like a belief system of like, if they got away with it, I can get away with it. Instead of being like, "Ooh, I didn't like how they treated me, and so I'm going to be a better version
Right.
than that." Right? Like and so I think that it's less about it's in your DNA, so that defines who you're going to be, and it's more about you choosing how you're going to express and like healing for someone who's raised in a narcissistically abusive home. Healing feels really scary because in a way you are literally rewiring your entire childhood. Like you
Yep.
have to look back. Like I remember the first and I relate to so many of my clients who first come to me and say the same things I did. They was like, but they were my mom, but they were my dad, but they did so much good for me. They kept me alive. They kept a roof over my house. I got a computer when I was a teenager. Like I was kind of spoiled. I got to go to Disney World. It's like, yeah, my childhood wasn't that bad physically. Like I can look at that on paper and say it wasn't that bad, and at the same time it was filled with emotional, mental, physical abuse.
Yeah.
So it's one of these things where when someone has to confront their past, they're stripping away a sense of their own identity. They're stripping away what they thought was an okay childhood, and like even just like learning to live with that duality of like, I can acknowledge like I had it good in these ways while also saying, and this was not okay either.
Yeah.
But that's a hard place to come to. That's where more cognitive dissonance comes in. How do I marry these two realities? That doesn't make sense to me.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think that we do have high correlation with people who are raised with an NPD parent developing BPD, borderline personality disorder, which is an intense desire for connection, but because it feels so unfamiliar, they sabotage it.
Wow.
Yeah. And that makes total sense when you look at a child who survived an NPD home and the desire for your connection is still there, but it doesn't feel familiar, it doesn't feel safe, so they push it away
They
when it
push it
gets
away.
too intense. Yeah.
Mm. Wow.
It's really sad. And
Yeah.
it makes me so passionate about this work because it's like even with the people who have NPD, like the beautiful thing about our brains is that they're plastic, right? Neuroplasticity is a thing, which means we are
Yep.
moldable, just like the Tupperware in our cabinets, right? Our brains are moldable. Our nervous systems respond to new stimulus. We can control them. We can choose new ways of being, new ways of feeling. The biggest hurdle anyone needs to get over is deciding, one, that they actually have that power. I think a lot of people want to give away that power. It's too hard. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. They're just giving it away, giving it away, giving it away. So one, it's owning that power. And then the other thing is being consistent with the activities you need to do. If
Yeah.
you can do those two things, you're fine and you're about to change your life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And even if you know someone who's a victim in a relationship, you really can tell them, hey, this is happening to you. They need
Oh,
to really see it for themselves and make that change.
I had so many friends try. I had
Yeah.
so many friends try when I was with my ex. They were like I vividly remember having conversations with people where I'm like, I know this relationship isn't going to go anywhere, but like at the time I was like early to mid 20s, and so I was like, but can I just have fun? Honestly, if I'm being, he was really handsome. And so I just like couldn't get over the fact because it was like I feel chosen by this really handsome guy
Right.
because I had put him on a pedestal, right? Not realizing like, Alex, you're a cute girl. You can get another good looking guy. Like, why settle for this treatment? But in my mind, like, I was so addicted to the thought of like this really handsome guy choosing me. And I remember my friend being like, if I was you, I wouldn't, one, allow someone to treat me this way, or two, waste my precious time. Like, I'm looking for a husband. Isn't that what you want? And I'm like, yeah, but like, do you see how cute he is? Like, and so, yeah, you can't, like, I got to a point to where I would stop telling my friends about it. We broke up, we got back together, we broke up, we got like almost every other day that was happening. And so I just started living a double life. And it
Yeah.
wasn't, I needed to see it. And
Yeah.
it took me another year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So how, I'm thinking as you're talking once again, like, there's a self-confidence issue there, maybe. I don't know. I don't know
100%.
you. Right. So, I mean, you're not confident that you'll get another cute guy or maybe a cute
No.
guy that's even nicer,
Oh
you
my
know.
God.
Right.
Yeah. A
So,
hundred
so,
percent.
so all this takes place. So, a majority of my audience are women, and I've always felt, and I'm, in a little older, and I've been through more relationships than a lot of people. A lot of times that I was a victim of a abusive relationships, which there were a few, or people who were addicted to substances. It was because I lacked the confidence. I didn't,
Yeah.
and I wasn't shown because
Mhm.
I wasn't in that perfect, my childhood had issues, had some verbal abuse. So I wasn't aware of what it was like to have a really good partner or have the confidence to even know to look for one.
Yeah.
So yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, do your clients that come to you, do you see a pattern of lack of self-confidence within them?
Yeah.
When
It's
yeah,
really weird because like this is the weirdest thing, and I'm sure you can relate to this, and I'm sure the people listening can relate to this too. The women, this is the weird thing about narcissists. Narcissists date up. Narcissists date up. So they
really?
look at the people they're dating, and there's something about them that they actually admire, that they put on a pedestal. And they're there in a way to balance the scale by pushing you down. And that's like one reason they fuel their abuse, right?
Makes
So
sense.
every single person who I have met have been these ridiculously successful women. And I look back at myself at this point in my life. I had my dream job. I used to dance for Disneyland. So I was dancing for Disneyland, like best shape of my life, my most favorite job I've ever had. And like, I was really successful. I was doing well. I was the life of the party. I was really outgoing, like, you know what I mean? Like good friends, and doing all those things. But internally, my internal world was so not confident.
Yeah.
Same thing with my clients, lawyers, doctors, working for Facebook, like really awesome jobs and like go getters. Like, yeah, I led this meeting today on this, that, and the other thing. Like, just killing it internally is where the lack of confidence is, because there are so many people that would look at me, and I'm sure this is true for the people I've helped and anyone listening, that would be like, why are you single? Why are you dealing with this loser? Like, you are such a catch, but you don't feel like you're a catch,
Right.
right? And so one of the ways that I illustrate this and people kind of go, aha, I get it now, is if we, because there's these, the thing that's true about these go-getter women, and I'm speaking from personal experiences, we push ourselves because the way we talk to ourselves is so harsh, right? And so it's like we excel because internally we're trying to prove our inner critic wrong. That inner critic is so loud. And so it's like inner critic is going off like, why'd you say that in that meeting? You put your foot in your mouth, like, da da da. And like, so next meeting is going to be even better because that inner critic's just beating us up. Why are you dressing like this? Why is your hair like that today? Your eye makeup could be better. Oh my God, your
I
butt
know you
needs to be
suck.
raised
Yeah.
4 inches.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all these things, like, why don't you have a thigh gap? Like, just these crazy things, right? And so it's like when we talk to ourselves that way, the second someone texts us, hey, beautiful, or the second someone is like on a date, hey, you're such a catch. Why are you single? And I'm going to treat you exactly the way that you've always wanted to be treated. The love bomb is what I'm alluding to here, right? From a
Right.
narcissist.
Right.
We gobble it up. We're like, yes, someone is telling me the things my inner world is so desperate to hear.
Yep.
Take me, sweep me off my feet. Let's run away to Morocco and get married, right? Like it becomes such a natural response because internally we're craving it. But what we don't realize is we can give it to ourselves. So then if we run that tape back and it's like, you know what? That meeting was really good. Here's an area I saw I could improve, and I'm going to do that better next time because I know I can. Way different than why'd you say that you put your foot in your mouth, right? It's like when we can develop a relationship with self that is constructive criticism, that is, hey, you know what? You look kind of cute today, even without your makeup on. You get it, girl, right? And we can have that kind of camaraderie, then I'm not going to fall for the love bomb because the standard has been risen so much higher,
Yeah.
you know?
That's good. Yeah. That's
It's like,
great.
yeah, you're gonna call me "Hey, beautiful," and you think that's enough of a text? Take me out to dinner. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course I'm beautiful. Like,
I really, really hope that the younger generation, because I know a lot of people in my age group and on older generation, they feel lack of self-confidence because they didn't know any better. They weren't taught better. There weren't resources back then. And they
totally.
didn't have people like you who are
Right.
here to educate people.
Yeah.
And, I see all the content you're putting out on your social media and the courses that you have. We're going to talk about that because I really want people to know what you're doing. You're here to make these gigantic waves of change so that, and I'm getting the goosebumps as I'm
Mm.
talking about this because I know you're going to do this. The younger generation, the younger people, the younger women who need and there's a lot of younger like teenage girls, they're not confident and they're going to
Mhm.
wind up in those type of situations
Yeah.
being love bombed because their inner critic is so loud.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying a lot. I'm hoping that it is changing, but people like you need to help and make these changes so that they're not these victims anymore and victims of their own voice,
Right. Yeah. For
not just
real.
other voice.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about dating consciously, which is I know you talk about that as well,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And attracting an aligned partner. So personally, I haven't dated in a long time because this month I'll be married 21 years. So
Oh, yay.
after kissing a lot of frogs,
Yeah.
being the victim of a lot of bullshit, I found the prince. So he's
Yeah.
still my prince. So it's awesome. But if I were to, but it's not like that. A lot of people are divorced after their kids go to
Mhm.
college. leave the house, empty nesters, they get divorced because they're ready to leave, make a change, whatever, or younger people. I wouldn't know where to begin. Um, so, what advice or what checklist do you have, a rule book or something that you can share with people out there who are ready to embark on, let's say, dating? Is there
Yeah.
something they need to do in order
Oh
to
my
get out there?
gosh. Well, I mean, I think it depends on the person you are. There's someone who comes to mind who's a 74-year-old gent, got divorced a couple summers ago, got on J Date, and I can't remember the other one he was on, eHarmony. So like some people are open to online dating, and if you are open to online dating, then what I always teach my clients is cast a narrow net, not a wide net. And the reason for that is online dating, your proximity, if you will, to people grows exponentially. Like it's huge, right? Like people that you aren't going to meet necessarily walking down the street or in your local coffee shop, you now could potentially meet online. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all those people are a good fit for you. And so when I teach my clients about online dating or apps, I say it's like marketing. There is a specific demographic you are targeting. You're not targeting everyone, right? So it's like be very specific, say the inside jokes, put your sense of humor forward, all of the taboo topics that you don't like to share with the general public, share it on your dating profile. And I'll give you an example that's a very taboo topic, especially for a healing practitioner, but I'll just keep it real. Um, I am not a big drinker. I much prefer marijuana.
Yeah,
And so it's like I needed to put that on my dating profile because it's like if someone thinks that I'm going to be going out constantly having drinks with them, that's not really the lifestyle that I partake in. You know what I
right.
mean? And so I want someone to know that before they match with me because I don't, if I'm going to ride off in the sunset with you, you need to know that one, I partake in that. And two, you need to be okay with it and not have this expectation that I'm going to be drinking with you all the time. Right. So that's like one example of the taboo topic that when I was dating, had on my profile because I know that's going to upset a lot of people, even maybe someone listening to the show right now. And that's okay, by the way. Like, I don't need everyone to accept that. But
No,
my
be
point
you.
has been proven.
Yeah.
That's my point, though, is like, I'm not for anyone romantically or practitionerly, if I'm making that word up. But you get what I'm saying. And that's what we want from dating because all those little quirky things about you that other people might have a strong response about, right? Like, you like to spend your weekends wood burning, or crafting and molding something with your hands, like that person is going to have a wonderful relationship with someone else who likes to work with their hands than like someone who's always at a music festival, maybe. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's like you want those specific things about you to be upfront on these larger platforms because you want very specific people to match with you, not everyone. It's about quality, not quantity. And then the other hot tip I have is go to more social events in your area with interests that you already enjoy. So, like the performing arts, pickleball, tennis. I'm used to live in Laguna Beach, so I'm trying to think of all the other
Oh,
activities.
nice. Yeah,
Hiking,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, all those
Hiking.
different
Right.
things,
Right.
going to the beach, right? Like, go on activities like that and just be open to just meeting new people. What's great about this is like the expectation of romance is gone because you're just meeting them in a neutral setting. So it's really easy to
Right.
take things slow, but then take it a step further and do like adjacent activities. So what I mean by that is like if you're a performing arts person, maybe you volunteer to be an usher at a show one night, right? If you're someone who does love to do wood burning stuff, maybe you're working with a craft store to like put on some kind of class one day. And the reason for that is because you're still in your interest. So you're going to enjoy doing that with your time regardless. But two, then you're going to start to meet people who consistently go to these things, who might also have other opportunities. And so again, you're just increasing your social network.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love that. Don't go, don't just sit at a bar, waiting for
Right.
someone to buy you a drink because they're going to expect that,
But
that's what you
also
like to
like
do.
going back to that, because that's such the normal, like so many people just think, and this I'm preaching the choir because this used to be me. It's like if I'm going to meet someone, I have to be like going out to these bars and like
Right.
getting drinks all the time. But like, I don't do that. I don't
Yeah.
do that in my life. So
Right.
it's like if you aren't someone who already goes to a bar every night for happy hour, don't force yourself to do that because guess what? You're going to meet someone who goes to a bar every night for happy hour and then you're going to end up fighting about that
Exactly.
down the line.
Exactly. Just be your authentic. Like you said,
Exactly.
you know,
That's the
be
magnet.
yeah, be truthful as what you like, what you don't like, and put it out there. And I think, for anybody, you have to realize that life is too short. You can't just you have to be
So
discerning,
true.
right? And
Yeah.
know that, and trust. I always say, you got to trust that the universe will provide for you and bring you who you need, as long as you're open. And and I also feel it's important to do the work also. If you come out of a relationship that has been quote unquote toxic,
Hmm.
do you encourage people to give themselves some space
Oh
first?
my
I mean,
gosh.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And the reason for that is to allow your nervous system to decompress. Like earlier in the show, when we were talking about all the different states and the hypervigilance that can come up and like the inability to relax, like you don't want a relationship hop in that state because you're not going to pick up on red flags. It's not going to be soothing to you the way that you think it will be. But when you give yourself space between relationships, especially something that's as gnarly as what we're talking about here today, you allow your nervous system to heal and repair and to find just stasis. And so that means that you'll pick up on red flags more because you're more grounded, you're more in your body, right? You're more in touch with your intuition. And that's like our own innate superpower. And it's like, I try and do
Yes.
everything from that place. Because if I'm not in that place, it's like, I'm not picking up on the cues. I'm not picking up on what feels safe and unsafe. Like, do I go left or right down this road? Just like little things like that. And it's it's such a superpower. So definitely take your time. The next question I get is, well, how much time? And there was a psychologist I worked with a while ago who would say at least half of the relationship. So it's like if you were together 3 years, a year and a half, be single for a year and a half.
Mm,
I have less than a textbook answer for it. And I really, what I would say that's more important is I don't care if you're single for 3 months, 6 months, or a year. The last time I was single for a year and it was great. I'm so glad I gave myself all that time. But what matters more is the nervous system work you're doing every day during that period of time because time does not heal all wounds. It is the biggest myth that is out there. It's the right healing exercises and activities plus time that equals healing and healing as efficiently as possible. So that's why, like, if my clients, they hear me say it all the time to the point to where they start rolling their eyes at me, but I'm like, it's the truth. Regulate, regulate, regulate your nervous system. Learn how to do that. And you will grab the life, like your life by the horns and like
yeah.
reclaim it so
Yeah,
fast.
it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned in one of your podcasts that I was listening that it's great to use while you're healing to use cognitive skills such as journaling and meditation and things, but you're talking also about nutrition and somatic awareness and those things.
Yeah.
So those are things that you offer. So people think, go home and say a mantra and do journaling, which are great,
No. Yeah.
right? But there's so many other ways that a person can recondition
Yep.
themselves or heal. Can you talk a
Yep.
little bit about some of these tactics?
Yeah, so we're talking about the difference between top down processing and bottom up processing. So when we talk about things like mantras, reframing thoughts, journaling, meditating, those are top down processes. And the reason I talk about this so much is because you only have 20% of your nerves that communicate brain to body. Bottom up processing, you're using 80% of your nerves because you have 80% that communicates body to brain to process these emotions and soothe. You tell me which is the bigger number, right?
Right.
So, when we look at different modalities that involve bottom up processing, those are things like what I'm talking with you about today: nervous system regulation, using breath work, tapping, grounding in nature, using your five senses, cold exposure. Those are all singing, humming, gargling, even havening, caressing. These are all physical examples of how you can regulate the nervous system using a bottom up approach. And then when you do that, the rest of the 20% follows suit real quick because you can actually access different parts of your mind to meditate and visualize and do all that good stuff. So yeah, and then the somatic experiencing side of it and parts work and EMDR, those are the three modalities I use in my programs, and I kind of wrap them all up together because they're three modalities that work really well together. The somatic experiencing side of it is like, what am I feeling in my body? I had a mentor who would say to me once, "How can you tell you're feeling anxious?" And I remember the first time he asked me that, I looked at him like he had 10 heads. I was like, "What do you mean? How can I tell?" And he was like, "Think about what you're feeling. How can you tell you're feeling anxious?" And that is a somatic experiencing question. What am I feeling in my stomach? Well, my hands are clamped and I'm just now realizing I'm picking my fingernails. Oh, my legs, I'm like gripping my toes on one foot. I'm squeezing my hand between my thighs. My stomach feels like I'm going to hurl. Okay, that's the somatic experience of your anxiety.
Yep.
So now I can tell when I'm anxious. I was talking to someone the other day and I was picking, and I noticed I was under my desk. I noticed I was picking, and I took a moment and I breathed and I was like, okay, can I feel my butt in my chair? And I relaxed my hand. I stopped picking my hand because I wasn't, there was a part of me that was a little like tapping out, dissociating a little because I started feeling anxious for whatever reason. And
Mhm.
so when we can become so aware of what our body is doing in response to whatever we're hearing or, emotionally responding to watching on TV, we can control it. But we live our lives so tuned out from what our bodies are telling us that it's like, I have a girl, God bless her soul. I have a girlfriend who bites her nails past the quick.
Oh
Oh, and
gosh.
it gives me that
Oh my gosh.
every time, and I'm just like, "Babe, what is going on in your mind?" And, like,
Yeah.
with some not from, like, a "What is going on?" Like, just very much like, "What are you escaping with that?" You
Mm.
know? Um And so any of those little behaviors that you notice that you might not be a fan of, like start to track them, start to recognize like when am I doing this? Okay, I'm having this conversation with this person. What about this conversation is overwhelming? Oh, I notice every time I'm in a room with this coworker, my body starts to do that. That's interesting, right? Just start asking yourself why. Every time I have to turn on this road for some reason, my body has this response. Curious, is it because there's less lighting on this like road at night or like what is it? Just start paying attention. And that right there will give you a huge leap. But those are the bottom up processing tools I like to use.
Yeah,
Sorry, that was a
and
huge
no,
tangent.
no, no, it's awesome because anxiety. I hear, especially women, they're constantly anxious, and I try
Yeah.
to talk to them, say like, "What are you feeling? Where are you feeling it?"
Hmm.
And sometimes they can't describe it, or they don't know why, and maybe they don't know why. It could be past trauma, or past life, even
Yeah.
past life trauma. Who knows? But yeah,
Yeah.
being aware because I teach yoga, and I always try to have people tune into what they're experiencing in their body, not their mind so much, but really in their body. Um, and use that as feedback and
Yeah.
signals because something is happening and we can help prevent something like an illness from occurring by
Hmm.
tuning in and
Oh
making
my
those subtle
gosh. Yeah.
changes in our lives to shift and to help with that. No, that was great. Um, so let's talk about some of your offerings because I know we're getting close to wrapping up and you are offering a few. I'd rather you talk about it. So
Yeah.
tell the audience what your some of your upcoming offerings are.
Yes. So the to kind of go into what we were just talking about with the somatic experiencing EMDR and parts work, that program is NARC trauma recovery. That's starting April 17th. I'm currently enrolling for it right now. And that is where we go deep into the healing work. So if you had a narcissistic parent or partner or boss or friend, it's for any kind of narcissist in your life to recover from that experience and reclaim your life and establish inner peace and heal the triggers. And then the last part of that program is skill building. So, communication skills,
Mm.
boundary setting skills, fighting fair skills, all that good stuff. So if you are interested in that, you can definitely hit the link. I'll go ahead and send that to you or message me on Instagram and I'd be happy to help you. Or even just head to my website, alexscot.com. And so that's definitely one that I would recommend if you want to go deep in the healing work, whether you're just starting, whether you've been on your healing journey and you want to go deeper, it's a great fit for you. If you're someone who's like, I'm about to leave this narcissistic person, or maybe you're fresh out and you just need help committing to no contact, I have an online course called Breakup SOS. And so those are the two that I'm happy to share that are most current and currently enrolling.
Great, thank you. And I'll put all the
Yeah,
show notes. Yeah. So
totally.
yeah, definitely check Alex out. She's just amazing. And I remember when we first had our little quick chat, I was like, oh wow, like there I could just listen to you all day. You're just amazing. And I
Thank
know,
you.
like I said, I really truly know you are going to help a lot of people and just keep on doing what you're doing because you're just amazing.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that so much.